The Great Hall of Kepler 9 station stretched wide enough to hold representatives from 147 different species. Today, every seat was filled. The air buzzed with the sound of 1,000 different languages being translated by machines that hung from every ear and collar. This was the biggest gathering in 200 years, and everyone knew something important was about to happen. Dae-hyun sat in the human section, his dark suit plain compared to the colorful robes and armor worn by other ambassadors. He had been Earth's representative for 5 years now, and he had learned one important thing. In a room full of species trying to look powerful, sometimes the best strategy was to look unimportant. Humans were good at that. Most species barely noticed them. That was about to change. The Vortok entered the hall like a storm. They were massive beings, each one standing 7 feet tall with muscles that looked carved from stone. Their leader, Rector the Unyielding, wore armor that gleamed red under the lights. Scars covered his arms and face, each one a story of battle. Behind him marched 12 more Vortok warriors, each one looking like they could break a normal person in half without effort. The hall fell silent. Even species that had no fear of the Vortok showed respect. For 300 years, the Vortok had been known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had never lost a formal challenge. Never. Their empire stretched across 50 star systems, and every world they controlled had been won through ritual combat. They believed in honor, glory, and the strength of the individual warrior above all else. Rector walked to the center of the hall. His voice boomed without needing any machine to make it louder. He spoke in the common tongue that most species used for trading and diplomacy. The Vortok Empire honors the strong and challenges the worthy. We have issued combat invitations to 12 species we believe possess warrior spirit. The rules are ancient and fair. Single combat, champion against champion. The winner claims honor. The loser learns humility. He began reading the list. The Kricks accepted immediately. They were a warrior race themselves, proud and quick to fight. The Altani declined politely, offering gifts instead of combat. The Borlon also declined, one by one. Species either accepted the challenge or found diplomatic ways to refuse without losing too much face. Then Rector said the word that made Dae-hyun sit up straighter in his chair. Humanity. Whispers filled the hall. Confusion spread like ripples in water. Why would the Vortak challenge humans? Earth had been part of the galactic community for only 80 years. They were explorers and scientists, not warriors. They had no great battles to their name. No fearsome reputation. They were the species that always tried to talk first and fight never. Challenging humans seemed almost like an insult to the other species on the list. Ambassador Therala, a graceful being from the Quilinar Collective, leaned toward Dae-hyun. Her people were known for their wisdom and long memories. She spoke quietly, her voice like wind through leaves. Do not accept this. There is no shame in declining. The Vortok do not understand your people, and you do not need to prove anything to them. Dae-hyun smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that did not reach his eyes. He stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with careful movements. The hall grew quieter, if that was possible. Everyone wanted to hear how humans would politely refuse we accept. The whispers became shouts. Species that had ignored humans for decades suddenly paid attention. Rector himself looked surprised, though he hid it quickly behind a warrior's mask of confidence. Dae-hyun continued, his voice calm and clear. However, we have one condition. Humanity will choose the format of each trial. Not just one trial. 5 trials, 5 different formats. If you truly seek to test warriors, then you must be willing to prove your strength in more than one way. Now Rector did look surprised. His warriors behind him shifted, hands moving toward weapons that were not there. In the hall, weapons were forbidden. The Vortok leader stared at Dae-hyun for a long moment, his eyes trying to understand what game this small human was playing. The Vortok do not fear any challenge, Rector finally said. His voice was slower now, more careful. We accept your terms. 5 trials, your formats. But know this, human. When we are done, the galaxy will understand the difference between those who talk of strength and those who live it. Dae-hyun bowed slightly, just enough to show respect but not submission. We look forward to showing you what humanity has learned in its long history. The first trial will be single combat, as you suggested. We will send our champion to meet yours. Rector laughed, a sound like thunder. Excellent. We shall meet on Vortak Prime in 7 days. My champion, Grath the Breaker, has won 89 consecutive combats. He will make this quick and honorable. The ceremony ended. Species filed out of the hall, already spreading news of the foolish humans who had accepted a Vortak challenge. Daehyun remained in his seat until most of the crowd had left. Thirala approached him, her large eyes filled with concern. "Why?" she asked simply. "Your people have nothing to gain and everything to lose. The Vortak will destroy your champion and humanity will be humiliated before the entire galaxy." Daehyun gathered his papers slowly. Maybe the galaxy has made a mistake about humanity. We have been here for 80 years, and in that time we have been very quiet about our past. Perhaps it is time the universe learned what kind of world produced us. What do you mean? Earth did not develop spaceflight until we had already survived 10,000 years of constant warfare. We did not meet aliens until we had already perfected every possible way to fight each other. The Vortak think they are warriors, but they have only ever fought others. Humans spent millennia fighting themselves. We got very, very good at it. Thirla felt a chill run through her long body. "You sound like you want this fight." "No," Daehyun said quietly. "We do not want it. But the Vortak need to learn something, and words will not teach them. Sometimes the only way to show someone why you choose peace is to show them what you are capable of in war." The next day, Daehyun stood in a private communication room, speaking to Earth through channels that took light years to cross but seemed instant thanks to quantum technology. On the screen, a woman in military uniform listened to his report. Jiwoo had served in the Earth Defense Forces for 12 years. She had trained in 7 different martial arts and had survived combat on 3 different colony worlds during the Resource Wars, back when human factions still fought each other before unity came. She was small by Vortak standards, barely 5.5 feet tall. But Daehyun had seen her personnel file. He knew what she could do. "Are you sure about this?" Jiwoo asked. Her voice was calm, professional. "I have seen recordings of Vortak fighters. They are strong. Very strong. Strength is not everything," Daehyun replied. "Can you win?" Jiwoo smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had fought when fighting was the only option left. If they think strength is all that matters, then yes, I can win. 7 days later, the galaxy watched as a human transport ship landed on Vortak Prime. Jiwoo stepped out onto red sand under a red sky. Around her, thousands of Vortak warriors had gathered to watch their champion destroy the weak human. They cheered and chanted, confident in their victory. In the center of the arena, Grath the Breaker waited. He was even larger in person, his muscles covered in ritual scars and war paint. He held a massive warhammer that looked too heavy for a normal person to even lift. Jiwoo wore simple combat clothing with no armor. She carried no weapon. She walked to the center of the arena with steady steps, her face showing no emotion. The referee, a neutral species chosen by both sides, explained the rules. No armor. Any melee weapon allowed. Fight until submission or death. Both fighters confirmed they understood. Grath looked down at Jiwoo. "You bring no weapon, little one? This will be over quickly. I will try to make your death honorable." Jiwoo looked up at him. Her smile was small and cold. "I will not need a weapon, and I promise this will be over quickly." The referee stepped back. He raised his hand. "Begin," and Jiwoo smiled wider. The crowd roared as Grath the Breaker charged. His warhammer swung through the air with terrible speed, fast enough to crush bone and armor together. It would have been an impressive attack against any normal opponent. Jiwoo was not there when the hammer landed. She had moved sideways, her feet sliding across the sand with practiced ease. The hammer hit empty ground, sending red dust flying into the air. Grath pulled his weapon back and swung again. Again, Jiwoo moved just enough to let it pass by. She did not try to block or catch the hammer. She simply was not where it wanted to be. The crowd began to jeer. Some called Jiwoo a coward. Others shouted that she should stand and fight like a warrior. But Grath said nothing. He was beginning to breathe harder now, sweat forming on his massive forehead. He swung again and again, each attack powerful enough to end the fight. Each attack hit nothing but air and sand. In the viewing stands, Daehyun sat next to a human doctor named Hyun-soo. The doctor was young but brilliant, specializing in alien biology and psychology. He watched the fight with careful attention, making notes on a small device. "She is not even trying to fight yet," Hyun-soo said quietly. "She is studying him," Daehyun replied. watching how he moves, learning his patterns. Humans are good at finding patterns. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Grath was breathing heavily now. His swings were still powerful but slower. The warhammer that had seemed so quick at the start now moved through the air like it was pushing through water. The jeering had stopped. The crowd was confused. They had expected a quick victory, blood and glory in the sand. Instead, they were watching their champion grow tired while chasing a small human who refused to fight. 20 minutes after the fight began, Jiwoo finally stopped dodging. Grath swung his hammer in a wide arc, putting all his remaining strength into the attack. This time, Jiwoo stepped forward instead of back. She moved inside the swing, too close for the hammer to reach her. Her hand struck Grath's elbow. It was a precise hit, targeting the nerves and tendons that allowed the joint to work properly. Grath grunted in pain and surprise. His grip on the hammer weakened. Jiwoo did not stop. She struck his knee next, then his other elbow, then a pressure point in his neck. Each hit was small and fast. None of them would have killed or seriously injured him, but together they added up. Pain and damage accumulated like drops of water filling a bucket. Grath tried to fight back. He dropped his hammer and tried to grab Jiwoo with his massive hands, but his arms were not working right anymore. His legs wobbled. The small strikes had done something his armor and strength could not protect against. They had attacked the weak points in his body, the places where nerves met bone and muscles connected to joints. Another 5 minutes passed. Jiwoo moved around Grath like water around a rock. Every few seconds, another precise strike. The side of his knee, the back of his ankle, the muscles in his shoulder. Places that most warriors never thought to defend, because armor did not cover them and strength did not protect them. Finally, Grath fell to one knee. He tried to stand but could not. His legs would not support him anymore. The accumulation of small injuries had stolen his ability to move. He looked up at Jiwoo with confusion in his eyes. He did not understand how he had lost. Jiwoo stood in front of him. She was barely breathing hard. Not a single scratch marked her skin. She could have killed him easily now. One strike to his throat or temple. But she did not. Instead, she knelt in the sand beside him. Her voice was quiet, meant only for him to hear. You fought with honor. Your strength is real. But my people learned something long ago. Strength without strategy is just strength. And strength gets tired. Grath tried to speak but could only manage a whisper. How did you defeat me? Jiwoo helped him sit more comfortably. Patience, you wanted to win quickly with power. I was willing to wait 20 minutes for you to become tired. My people spent thousands of years fighting each other. We learned that the warrior who strikes first does not always win. Sometimes the warrior who strikes last wins instead. The referee approached. Seeing that Grath could not continue and that Jiwoo was not going to kill him, he raised his hand toward the human. The winner is the human champion. The crowd was silent. In 300 years of challenges, no one had defeated a Vortak champion this way. There had been no glorious battle, no exchange of mighty blows, just patience and precision. It felt wrong to them, like winning by not fighting at all. Rektor the Unyielding stood in the viewing box reserved for Vortak leaders. His face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the railing hard enough to make the metal creak. Around him, other Vortak warriors whispered in confusion and shame. Daehyun approached the viewing box. He bowed respectfully to Rektor. The first trial is complete. Humanity has won. We propose that the second trial be squad combat, 5 against 5. Your elite death guard against our special forces. Rektor stared at the human ambassador for a long moment. His warriors had just witnessed the impossible. Their champion, undefeated in 89 battles, had been beaten by a small human who never even tried to kill him. Pride demanded they refuse. Honor demanded they continue. We accept, Rektor said. His voice was hard as stone. The elite death guard will show you what true warriors can do when they fight as a unit. Your special forces will not have the luxury of endless dodging. In squad combat, there is nowhere to hide. Daehyun smiled slightly. We look forward to it. The location will be an abandoned colony on the moon of Theta 4. Urban environment, buildings and tunnels. Both teams will be inserted with basic weapons and equipment. Last team standing wins done, Rektor said. 3 days from now, my death guard will be ready. That evening, Jiwoo sat in her quarters on the human ship. Her body ached from the constant movement, but she had won without taking a single hit. Daehyun visited to congratulate her. You did well, he said. The galaxy is talking about nothing else. They do not understand how you won. Jiwoo stretched her sore muscles. They think fighting is about power and glory. Humans learned it is about survival. I survived. He did not. He survived, Daehyun corrected gently. You chose not to kill him. Yes. Because killing him would not have proven anything except that I could kill. I wanted to prove something else. That human methods work better than Vortak methods. That is more important than any single death. Daehyun nodded. The next trial will be harder. Squad combat is different. They will expect us to use the same tactics. Then we will use different tactics, Jiwoo said. That is another thing humans are good at. We adapt. On Vortak Prime, Grath sat in a medical center while doctors worked to repair the damage to his nerves and tendons. It would take weeks for him to fully recover. His pride hurt worse than his body. Rector visited him. The commander stood beside the bed, his face troubled. You fought with honor, Grath. No one blames you for the loss. Grath looked up at his commander. I do not understand, Lord Rector. I was stronger, faster, better armed. How did she win? Rector was quiet for a moment. I do not know, but I intend to find out. The humans are not what we thought they were. They are not weak. They are something else, something we have not encountered before. What do we do? Grath asked. We continue the trials, Rector said firmly. The elite Death Guard will not fail. They are the best warriors in our empire. They fight as a perfect unit. The humans may have won one battle, but they will not win the war. Across the galaxy, broadcasts showed the fight again and again. Species that had ignored humanity now watched with interest. The small species that preferred talking to fighting had just defeated the greatest warrior civilization in known space. Not through luck, not through technology, but through patience and precision. Ambassador Thirala watched the recording for the 5th time. She had lived for 300 years and studied 100 different species. She thought she understood humans. Now she realized she had been wrong. She had seen them as weak because they avoided conflict. She had not understood that avoiding conflict and being unable to win conflict were very different things. She began researching human history. What she found terrified her. Humans had been fighting wars for 10,000 years before they ever left their planet. They had not learned combat from other species. They had invented it themselves, refined it, perfected it through endless practice against the only worthy opponents they had ever known, each other. The abandoned colony on the moon of Theta 4 had been empty for 30 years. Once 5,000 people had lived here, mining rare metals from deep beneath the surface. Now it was just empty buildings and dark tunnels, perfect for what the Vortak called a true test of warriors. The Vortak Elite Death Guard arrived first, 5 warriors, each one trained from childhood in the art of squad combat. They wore light armor and carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel. Their leader was a massive warrior named Korath, veteran of 40 successful campaigns. He had never lost a squad member in combat. Never. The rules were simple. Both squads would be dropped on opposite sides of the colony. They had 3 days to win by eliminating the other squad. Sensors would track both teams and broadcast their positions every 6 hours to ensure the fight would eventually happen. No outside help, no resupply. Just 5 against 5 in an urban battlefield. Korath gathered his death guard in the ruins of what had once been a mining administration building. We move as one unit, standard advance formation. They are only 5 humans. We are 5 Vortak warriors. This will be over quickly. On the other side of the colony, Lieutenant Taemin gathered his special forces team. He was young for a lieutenant, only 30 years old, but he had survived urban combat during the Hong Kong uprising, one of the last major conflicts before Earth unified. With him were 4 specialists, each one an expert in their field. Corporal Young Hee handled communications and electronic warfare. Sergeant Dongwook was their sniper and scout. Medic Bora had trained in guerrilla warfare tactics. Private Sung Ho, the youngest at 23, specialized in explosives and trap-making. Taemin looked at his team. Everyone remembered the briefing on Vortak tactics. They will advance aggressively, expecting to find us and overwhelm us with superior firepower. So we will not be where they expect. We disappear completely, no contact, no engagement until we are ready. Young Hee grinned. She was already working on her portable computer, hacking into the colony's old systems. I can loop the sensor feeds. Make it look like we are moving when we are not. They will waste time chasing ghosts. Good, Taman said. Seung-ho, you will set traps along their likely paths. Nothing lethal yet. Just things that make noise and slow them down. We want them frustrated and tired. Dong-wook, you will watch from hidden positions but do not shoot. I want to know where they are at all times. The team moved out immediately. Within 2 hours, they had vanished into the colony like smoke and wind. They left no tracks, no heat signatures, no signs they had ever been there. The old mining tunnels became their highways, allowing them to move beneath the surface where sensors could not find them. The Vortak Death Guard began their advance at dawn of the first day. They moved in perfect formation, covering each other's positions, clearing buildings with professional efficiency. By midday, they had searched a quarter of the colony. They found nothing. The 6-hour sensor update came. It showed the human squad in the southern section of the colony, near the old processing plant. Korath led his death guard there quickly. They arrived within an hour, weapons ready. The processing plant was empty. There were no signs anyone had been there recently. Confused, Korath ordered his squad to search more carefully. They found nothing. When the next sensor update came 6 hours later, it showed the humans in the eastern residential area. The death guard rushed there. Again, nothing. By the end of the first day, Korath was frustrated. The humans were playing games with the sensors somehow. Fine. If the sensors could not be trusted, the death guard would search every building, every tunnel, every dark corner until they found their prey. The second day began at dawn. The death guard had not slept well. Strange sounds had echoed through the colony all night. Footsteps that disappeared when investigated, scratching noises in the walls, shadows that moved in the corner of vision but were gone when looked at directly. One Vortak warrior, a veteran named Zrek, was checking a building when something clicked under his foot. A tripwire. Nothing exploded, but suddenly every old speaker in the building began screaming recorded sounds of combat. Plasma fire shouting explosions. It lasted for 3 minutes before shutting off. Zrek was unharmed but shaken. The humans were playing with them. That afternoon, another warrior found her equipment moved while she had been sleeping. Her rifle was 15 feet away from where she had left it, carefully placed on top of a pile of boxes. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was stolen. But someone had been close enough to touch her things while she slept, and she had not woken up. Korath called his squad together. They were all experienced warriors, but he could see the stress in their eyes. The humans were fighting a kind of war the Vortak had never encountered. There was no honor in it, no glorious battle. Just endless psychological pressure and the growing fear that they were being hunted instead of doing the hunting. The third day began with disaster. One of the Death Guard warriors, a female named Vrel, simply did not wake up when the others did. She was breathing but unconscious. There were no wounds, no signs of violence, just a small injection mark on her neck. She had been drugged. While the entire squad had been sleeping nearby, someone had come close enough to sedate her and leave her alive. Korath tried to wake her but could not. He left 2 warriors to guard her and took the remaining warrior to continue the search. They had to find the humans before this psychological warfare destroyed his squad's effectiveness completely. Hours later, one of the guards disappeared. The other guard had looked away for just 10 seconds, and when he looked back, his companion was gone. No sound, no struggle, just gone. The remaining guard began shouting into his communicator, panic clear in his voice. Korath rushed back to find only one guard and still unconscious Vrel. 3 of his 5 warriors were now unable to fight. He had never experienced anything like this. The humans had not fired a single shot. They had not engaged in any direct combat. Yet his elite squad was falling apart. That night, Korath and his last warrior sat back to back in a defensible position, weapons ready. They would not sleep. They would wait for the humans to come. But the humans did not come. Instead, sounds came. Footsteps on the roof, scratching in the walls, whispers in the darkness that might have been wind but sounded like voices. By dawn of the 4th day, the last warrior besides Korath was gone. He had left his position for just a moment to investigate a noise. Korath heard a soft thud, then silence. He rushed to find his companion unconscious on the ground, another injection mark on his neck. Korath stood alone in the abandoned colony. He was a veteran warrior, trained to face any enemy, but he could not fight shadows. He could not battle an enemy that refused to be seen. For the first time in his life, Korath understood true fear. Not the fear of dying in battle, but the fear of being hunted by something you could not see, could not predict, and could not fight. He activated his emergency beacon, the universal sign of surrender. Within minutes, a figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby building. Lieutenant Taemin, followed by his intact squad. All 5 humans were unharmed and looked well rested. Korath stared at them, his weapon lowered. "How? Where are my warriors?" Taemin gestured to a sealed building nearby. "All alive and unharmed, sedated but safe. They will wake in a few hours, but how did you take them? We are trained warriors, the best in our empire." Taemin studied the Vortak warrior. His expression was not unkind, but it was not friendly either. "You are warriors trained to fight honorable battles against enemies you can see. We are soldiers trained to fight wars where the enemy must not know we exist. Your culture celebrates the warrior who wins through strength. Our history forced us to develop warriors who win through invisibility. You never saw us because we did not want to be seen. This is not honorable combat," Korath said quietly. "No," Taemin agreed. "It is not. It is asymmetric warfare. It is psychological operations. It is everything humans learned from thousands of years fighting each other in cities and jungles and mountains. We did not invent honorable combat. We invented every other kind of combat there is. And we got very good at all of them." The broadcast of the trial showed everything. The galaxy watched as the supposedly inferior human squad had dismantled an elite Vortak unit without firing a single shot. Some species were impressed. Others were terrified. All of them were beginning to understand that they had badly misjudged humanity. On Vortak Prime, Rector watched the recording and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Uncertainty. What kind of species had his empire challenged? And what would the next trial bring? Ambassador Thirala stood before the Galactic Assembly, her long fingers trembling slightly as she held the data device. She had spent weeks researching human military history. What she had discovered kept her awake at night. Now she needed to share it with the galaxy before it was too late. The assembly hall was packed. Every species wanted to understand what was happening. The Vortak Empire, undefeated for 300 years, had now lost 2 trials to humanity. Impossible. Yet it had happened. "Honored representatives," Thirala began, her voice steady despite her fear. "I have completed my study of human military history. What I have found explains much, and it terrifies me." She activated the display. Images appeared in the air above the assembly. Battlefields, weapons, machines of war. Most species had never seen anything like them. Earth had developed weapons technology centuries before they developed space travel. They had learned to kill each other with terrible efficiency. Humans fought wars for over 10,000 years before leaving their planet, not occasional battles with other species. Constant warfare among themselves. They developed every possible method of combat. Infantry tactics, naval warfare, aerial combat, chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. They invented ways to destroy entire cities in seconds. The assembly was silent, absorbing this information. Thirala continued, "But that is not the most important thing. The important thing is this: they survived. They invented weapons that could destroy their entire species, and then they chose not to use them. They learned from their wars. They created laws about how to fight, rules about treating prisoners, agreements about what weapons were too terrible to use." She looked directly at Rector, who sat in the Vortak section. "The Vortak believe warriors are the pinnacle of civilization. Humans learned that warriors are what you need when civilization fails. They became the greatest warriors in their history because they had no choice. And then they worked for centuries to build a world where warriors were no longer necessary." Rector stood. His face was carved from stone, showing no emotion. "Your research is interesting, Ambassador, but words and history do not change reality. The Vortak Empire remains strong. We have announced the 3rd trial. Strategic warfare. 500 of our warriors against whatever force humanity chooses to send. Full military engagement with armor, aircraft, and artillery support. How many soldiers will humanity send?" A representative from the Krix Empire asked. "Surely 500 at minimum to have any chance." Daehyun stood from the human section. 50. The assembly erupted in confusion. 50 against 500? It was madness. Even with humanity's unconventional tactics, the numbers were impossible. Rector smiled for the first time since the trials began. 50 soldiers, very well. The battle will take place on Theta 7, a contested planet with varied terrain. We will show the galaxy what happens when humans try to fight a real war. 3 days later, Colonel Su Jin stood on a mountain ridge, looking down at the valley below through digital binoculars. She was 52 years old, a historian who specialized in ancient Earth battles. She had studied every major war in human history. She knew what worked and what did not. Her force of 50 soldiers had taken position in the mountains. They had spent 2 days building defensive positions and setting up their equipment. Not soldiers with rifles, mostly technicians, analysts, and drone operators. The Vortak would be expecting an army. They would find something else instead. Captain Jun Seo approached. The supply analysis is complete. The Vortak have 3 main supply lines: food, ammunition, and medical supplies. All 3 routes are now under surveillance. I have teams ready to cut them when you give the order. Good, Sujin said. Major Inha, is the broadcast system ready? Major Inha, a specialist in psychological operations, nodded. We have hacked into their communication systems. We can send any message we want directly to their personal devices. They will hear it whether they want to or not. Warrant Officer Mi Kyung worked at a bank of computers controlling 40 autonomous drones. Each drone carried sensors and small weapons. They were not powerful enough to win battles, but they were perfect for harassment, surveillance, and precision strikes. The Vortak army would never rest, never feel safe. The Vortak army arrived that afternoon. 500 warriors in armored vehicles supported by aircraft and artillery. They were a professional military force, trained in traditional warfare. They expected to find 50 human soldiers dug in somewhere, waiting to be overwhelmed by superior numbers. Instead, they found nothing. The humans had taken position in mountains that provided natural defense. Long sight lines meant any approaching force would be seen from miles away. The Vortak could not advance without being exposed. The Vortak commander ordered an assault. His forces began advancing up the mountain approaches. Immediately, drones appeared. They did not attack the main force. Instead, they hit communication arrays, disabled vehicles at the back of the column, and forced the Vortak to spread out their defensive efforts. When the Vortak tried to use their aircraft, automated defense systems came online. Human technology was not as powerful as Vortak weapons, but it was precise. Aircraft had to fly high to avoid being shot down, making them unable to provide effective support to ground forces. The first day ended with the Vortak having advanced less than a mile. They had lost no warriors but had expended significant ammunition and fuel defending against drone attacks. That night, Captain Jun Seo's teams cut the first supply line. The Vortak would receive no more ammunition until they could re-establish the route. The second day began with Major Inha's broadcast. Every Vortak warrior received the same message on their personal communicators, a calm human voice explaining the history of siege warfare on Earth, how armies could be defeated without battle by cutting supply lines and waiting, how attacking a defensive position in mountains had destroyed countless armies throughout human history. The broadcast continued for hours. Stories of famous battles where larger armies had lost to smaller forces, statistics on casualties, explanations of how humans had learned to fight wars not through courage and strength, but through careful analysis of logistics and strategy. By the third day, the Vortak commander was facing a difficult situation. His forces were running low on ammunition. Medical supplies were limited. Food was rationed. The humans had not engaged in a single direct battle, yet his army was slowly being strangled by invisible hands. He ordered another assault, this time committing his entire force. If they could reach the human position, they could end this with direct combat. But the mountain approaches were narrow. The Vortak could not use their numerical advantage. They had to advance in columns, and columns were vulnerable to precision strikes from drones. The assault failed, not because of heavy casualties, but because it was unsustainable. Every meter gained cost ammunition and energy. The humans simply pulled back to higher positions, always staying out of reach, always forcing the Vortak to expend resources. By the 7th day, the Vortak army was in crisis. They had food for 3 more days, ammunition for perhaps 2 battles. Medical supplies were nearly exhausted. The human broadcast continued, now including detailed analysis of the Vortak's exact situation. The humans knew everything about their enemy's status. The Vortak knew almost nothing about the humans. On the 10th day, the Vortak commander requested a meeting. Colonel Sujin agreed. They met in a neutral location, both arriving with small guards. The Vortak commander looked tired. His armor was dusty, and his eyes showed the stress of commanding an army that was slowly dying without fighting. "Why will you not fight us honorably?" he demanded. Sujin's expression was cold. "Honorable combat is a luxury of species who have never faced extinction. Earth has buried 17 major civilizations that fell to war. We learned that honor matters less than survival. You have 500 warriors. We have 50 soldiers. If we fought your way, we would lose. So we fight our way instead. This is not warfare. This is cowardice." "No," Sujin replied. "This is strategy. This is what humans learned from 10,000 years of constant war. We learned every method of combat: direct assault, siege warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, economic warfare. We became experts in all of them because we had to. Our survival depended on it." The commander was silent for a long moment. "What happens now?" "You withdraw, or you stay until your supplies run out and your warriors starve. Those are your options, and if we withdraw, then we have proven our point, that human methods work better than Vortak methods. That war is not about courage or honor. It is about winning. And humans learned how to win wars against ourselves long before we ever met aliens." 2 days later, the Vortak army withdrew. They had lost only 12 warriors to accidents and equipment failures. But they had been defeated completely. The galaxy watched in shock as 500 elite warriors retreated before 50 human soldiers who had never engaged in direct combat. Rector the Unyielding sat in his command center on Vortak Prime, watching the broadcast. His empire's reputation lay in ruins. 3 trials, 3 defeats, and now he understood the terrible truth. The humans were not lucky. They were not weak. They were simply better at war than anyone else in the galaxy, because they had more practice than anyone else. Rector the Unyielding had never felt so much like his name was a lie. 3 defeats, 3 humiliations. The entire galaxy watched as the mighty Vortak Empire lost again and again to a species they had dismissed as weak talkers. His honor demanded one final attempt, one last chance to prove Vortak's superiority. He stood before the Galactic Assembly, his armor polished but his pride broken. "I invoke the right of total war. No rules, no limits. The Vortak Empire will commit our full military strength against humanity. Winner takes all. This is our final challenge." The assembly hall erupted in chaos. Total war was an ancient right rarely invoked. It meant true military conflict between 2 species. Not a ritual, not a trial. Actual war. Thousands of ships. Millions of warriors. Species watching from nearby systems began evacuating, expecting destruction on a massive scale. Dae-hyun stood calmly. His response was just 2 words. "We accept." Both sides were given 3 months to prepare. The battle would take place in the neutral zone between human and Vortak space. The Vortak immediately began mobilizing their entire fleet. Thousands of warships assembled. Weapons were tested. Warriors trained. This time there would be no clever tactics or psychological games. This would be pure military force. The galaxy waited to see what humanity would do. Would they match the Vortak fleet size? Would they bring secret weapons? Every species watched Earth with nervous anticipation. 3 months passed. The Vortak fleet assembled in the neutral zone. It was an awesome sight. Thousands of ships arranged in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. Millions of warriors prepared for glorious battle, the largest military force the Vortak Empire had ever assembled. Humanity sent 1 ship, a single diplomatic vessel with no weapons and minimal crew. Rector watched from his flagship as the small human ship approached. Was this a joke, an insult? He ordered his communications officer to hail the vessel. The face that appeared on the screen was Fleet Admiral Kyung-hwa, a woman in her 60s with white hair and calm eyes. "Where is your fleet?" Rector demanded. "Where are your warriors?" Admiral Kyung-hwa smiled slightly. "We brought what we need. Commander Rector, I request a private meeting. Just you, me, and a few advisors. What we have to show you requires personal discussion." Rector was confused but agreed. He brought 2 senior commanders. The humans brought Admiral Kyung-hwa, Ambassador Dae-hyun, and a scientist named Dr. Hee-jin, who specialized in xenoanthropology, the study of alien cultures. They met in a neutral conference room on an automated station. Rector entered ready for tricks or traps. Instead, he found a simple table with chairs and a large display screen. "What is this?" Rector asked. "Where is your army?" "We brought something more powerful than any army," Dr. He Jin said. She activated the display. Information. The complete military history of humanity. Every war, every battle, every weapon we ever developed. We are going to show you exactly what you challenged. The display began showing images. Ancient battles with swords and spears. Medieval warfare with castles under siege. Gunpowder weapons that killed from a distance. Mechanized warfare with tanks and aircraft. Chemical weapons that turned battlefields into death zones. Nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities in an instant. Rector watched in growing horror. The scale of human violence was incomprehensible. They had developed weapons that could sterilize their entire planet. They had fought wars that killed millions. They had perfected genocide, torture, and every other method of inflicting suffering. "But this is madness," Rector whispered. "How did your species survive?" Admiral Kyung-hwa spoke now, her voice gentle but firm. "We survived because we learned. The display is now showing you something else. Watch carefully, the images changed. Now they showed humans helping former enemies. Peace treaties. War crime tribunals. The Geneva Conventions that limited how war could be fought. Organizations dedicated to preventing conflict. Monuments built to honor dead enemies. Poetry written by soldiers about the horror of war. After we developed nuclear weapons, Dr. Hyjin explained, humanity faced a choice. We could use them and destroy ourselves, or we could learn to live without using them. We chose survival. We created international laws. We built systems to prevent war instead of glorifying it." Rector stared at the display, understanding slowly dawning. "You showed us your capacity for violence to demonstrate why you choose peace." "Exactly," Admiral Kyung-hwa said. "The Vortak Empire believes warriors are the pinnacle of civilization, the highest achievement of culture. But humans learned something different. We learned that warriors are what you become when you fail to solve problems any other way. Warriors are the failure state of civilization, not the success state." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the massive Vortak fleet. "You have assembled millions of warriors ready to die for glory. We sent teachers, historians, and diplomats ready to show you a better path. Because we have been where you are now. We have glorified war and honored warriors and built entire civilizations around the idea that strength through combat is the ultimate achievement." "And where did it lead you?" Rector asked quietly. "To the edge of extinction," Dae-hyun answered. "Multiple times. We almost destroyed ourselves with chemical weapons. We almost destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons. We almost destroyed ourselves with biological weapons. Every time we developed a new way to fight, we used it. And every time we had to learn again that war solves nothing permanently." The room was silent except for the sound of the display continuing to show human history, the terrible wars, the slow learning process, the gradual shift from glorifying warfare to preventing it. "What do you want from us?" Rector asked. "Why show us this instead of fighting?" "Because fighting you teaches you nothing," Dr. Hyjin said. "If we destroy your fleet, you learn that we are stronger. If you destroy our fleet, you learn that you are stronger. Either way, war continues to be your answer. We want to teach you something more important. That there are better answers." Admiral Kyung-hwa returned to the table. "Commander Rector, I am 63 years old. When I was young, I served in the last major war between human factions before we unified. I killed people. Good people who believed they were fighting for the right cause, just as I believed I was. I learned something in that war. I learned that being willing to die for your beliefs is easy. Being willing to live with people you disagree with is much harder, and much more important." She pulled up a final image on the display. It showed Earth from space, blue and green and beautiful. "This is our world. For 10,000 years we covered it with battlefields and graves. We poisoned our air and water with weapons. We built monuments to warriors and wrote songs about glorious death. And we almost lost everything. Then what saved you?" Rector asked. "The willingness to admit we were wrong," Dae-hyun said. "The courage to say that our ancestors, for all their bravery and honor, had been making the same mistake for millennia. That true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to choose not to destroy." Rector stood slowly. His commanders looked at him, waiting for orders. He could still order the attack. His fleet was ready. But he was a warrior, not a fool. He had seen what humanity was capable of in the previous trials. And now he understood why they had won. Not because they were better warriors, but because they understood war better than anyone else in the galaxy. "I surrender all 5 trials," Rector said formally. "The Vortak Empire acknowledges defeat, not because humanity has superior warriors, but because humanity has superior wisdom about the cost of war." The news spread across the galaxy instantly. The Vortak Empire, undefeated for 300 years, had surrendered without fighting. But it was not the surrender that shocked everyone. It was what came next. The Galactic Assembly met 1 week later. Rector and Daehyun stood together before the representatives. They announced a joint proposal. Humanity and the Vortak would establish military academies together, not to teach warfare, but to teach the wisdom that comes from surviving warfare, to show other species that warrior cultures can evolve into something better. Ambassador Thirala watched from her seat, feeling something she had not felt in years: hope. Perhaps the galaxy could learn from humanity's terrible mistakes. Perhaps other species could skip the 10,000 years of war and jump straight to the peace that came after. 50 years passed. The Vortak Empire transformed. They remained warriors, but their purpose changed. They protected instead of conquered. They defended instead of attacked. Their strength was no longer measured in battles won, but in wars prevented. Rector, now elderly and retired, served as an ambassador to Earth. He spent his final years teaching young Vortak about humanity. When asked about the trials, about what happened to the mightiest warriors who challenged humans, he always gave the same answer. "We were never heard from again," he would say with a slight smile. "Because we finally learned to listen instead of speak. We learned that the strongest warrior is the one who knows when not to fight. The humans did not defeat us. They saved us from ourselves. And for that we will be forever grateful."